I said it without thinking. That's the honest truth. The cashier at Canadian Tire asked if Laurel and I were shopping together, and I said, yeah, she's my wife. Just like that. Casual as ordering a coffee. Laurel went completely still beside me. Then she turned to look at me, and her cheeks went a color I'd never seen on her before, this soft, involuntary pink, and she leaned in close enough that I could smell her shampoo and whispered, barely loud enough for me to catch it. I wish. Then the moment was gone. The cashier smiled and scanned the caulking gun, and we walked out to the parking lot like nothing had happened, and I spent the next 3 years wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. I should back up. My name is Garrett, and at the time of that Canadian Tire moment, I was 31 years old, and I had known Laurel Quinlan for 4 years. We met when I was doing electrical work on the house she'd just bought, a narrow 1940s two-story in East Hamilton, Ontario, the kind with original hardwood floors and a fuse box that belonged in a museum. She'd moved back from Vancouver after a relationship ended, bought the cheapest livable house she could find, and immediately started trying to fix it herself. The first time I showed up, she was on a ladder in the kitchen, trying to patch a ceiling crack with the wrong kind of compound. I told her she was going to have to redo the whole thing. She said, I know, I'm practicing being bad at things, so I stopped being afraid of them. I didn't know what to say to that. I went and did my work. She brought me coffee without being asked. She remembered how I took it. Black, no sugar, from the first day, and never got it wrong once in 4 years. I don't know why that stuck with me. It just did. We became friends the way you do when you spend a lot of slow Saturday mornings in someone's kitchen while they're slowly learning how not to strip screws. She'd ask me questions about what I was doing and actually listen to the answers. I'd ask her about her job. She was a high school art teacher, the kind students actually liked, and she'd tell me stories about her kids that were funny and sad and real. We texted each other renovation memes. We watched the same hockey games from different couches and argued by text message. Once, when her hot water heater died at 11 on a Wednesday night, she called me first. I drove over. That's just how it was. The thing is, I knew how I felt. I'd known for a long time. But Laurel was fresh out of something that had cost her a lot, and I wasn't willing to risk what we had on a feeling I wasn't sure she shared. So I didn't say anything. I just kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept being her friend, and told myself that was enough. It wasn't enough. But I was good at pretending. The Canadian Tire moment happened in November, 4 years in. We were picking up supplies for a weekend project. She'd finally decided to tackle the bathroom tile, and it was one of those gray Hamilton Saturdays where the whole city feels damp and the sky sits low and close. We'd been in the store maybe 20 minutes, laughing about a novelty flashlight shaped like a moose when the cashier made the assumption. Yeah, she's my wife. I don't know where it came from. It just fell out of my mouth like it lived there. And then she whispered, I wish, and I froze completely. And the cashier handed me my receipt, and Laurel walked ahead toward the exit. And by the time I caught up, she was already talking about which grout color she'd decided on. And her voice was totally normal. And I couldn't tell if she'd meant it or if it was a throwaway thing, the kind of easy banter between close friends that doesn't mean anything at all. I almost asked her. I was 2 words away from asking her. Instead, I said, yeah, the gray will look better with the fixtures. And we drove back to her place and spent the rest of the day on our knees cutting tile. I think about that choice a lot. Even now, I went quiet after that. Not on purpose, or maybe a little on purpose. I needed some distance to figure out what I was doing with myself because I was 31 years old and I was spending my Saturdays doing home renovation projects for a woman I was in love with and calling that friendship. And I was starting to understand that I couldn't keep doing it indefinitely without it costing me something. So I took a step back. Not dramatically. I didn't disappear. I just became a little less available, responded to texts a little slower, said no to a couple of Saturdays because I had other things going on, which was true. Laurel didn't push. She never pushed. She just said, okay, no worries, and that was that. I told myself she probably didn't even notice. I was probably not as central to her Saturdays as I'd imagined. I was the electrician friend. She had a whole life I wasn't part of. Teachers, other friends, her sister in Guelph she drove up to see every few weeks. I almost had myself convinced. Then one evening in February, 3 months after Canadian Tire, I was driving back from a job in Stony Creek and I took the long way home. The way that goes past her street, and I don't know why I looked, but I did, and there was a car in her driveway I didn't recognize. Dark blue Audi, Ontario plates. I kept driving. It wasn't my business. It wasn't. She texted me the next week to ask if I knew anything about load-bearing walls, and I answered her question in 2 sentences and didn't ask about the car. I found out about Brendan Solt the way I found out about most things with Laurel. She mentioned him sideways, inside a conversation about something else. We were at a ticket game in March. This had been on the calendar since October, we never canceled, and at halftime, while we were in line for hot chocolate, she said, "Oh, I've been seeing someone, just so you know. Nothing serious. His name's Brendan." "That's great," I said, and I meant it, or I tried to. She looked at me for a second like she was waiting for something. I don't know what. I smiled and handed her the hot chocolate, and she looked away. "He works in commercial real estate," she said. "Does well for himself. Good. He's fine." Fine is a word that means a lot of things. I didn't press. We watched the second half. Hamilton lost, which felt right somehow. I met Brendan Solt once, in April. I'd stopped by Laurel's to return a level I'd borrowed, and he answered the door. Tall guy, well-dressed even on a Sunday, the kind of handshake that communicates something on purpose. He was polite. He looked at me the way men look at other men they've already decided aren't a threat. Laurel appeared behind him in the hallway, and something moved across her face when she saw me. Something quick that I couldn't read. She introduced us. Brendan smiled the smile of a man who'd won without knowing there was a game. I left the level and drove home and sat in my truck in my own driveway for a while. I started to think that maybe I'd made the wrong call in November, that maybe I wish had meant something and I'd let it pass, and now it was March, April, and Brendan Solt was answering her door. That's on me. I know that. What I didn't know through the spring and into early summer was what Brendan Solt actually did for a living. Commercial real estate was the story. And he did work in real estate, technically. He just had a particular sideline in using that credibility to steer people toward what he called private pre-construction investment opportunities, which, as I eventually understood, meant he collected significant deposits from people hoping to get in early on a development, and then those people never saw their money or their unit because the development either didn't exist or was structured in a way that made it functionally impossible to recover funds from. He was good at it. He looked the part. He had the car and the handshake and the right vocabulary, and he'd apparently been doing some version of this in different cities, Calgary, then Ottawa, and now Hamilton, for long enough to have a system. What I didn't know, until the second week of July, was that Laurel was about to give him $50,000. I found out from Laurel's friend Cassidy, who called me on a Tuesday afternoon the way people call you when they don't know who else to call. Cassidy said she'd been trying to talk Laurel out of it for 2 weeks, that Brendan had presented the opportunity as low-risk, boutique, the kind of thing normal people don't get access to, that Laurel had been doing research on her own, but the materials Brendan provided were convincing, professional, detailed, full of the right language, that she had already wired a deposit of $10,000 and the remaining $40,000 was going through on Friday. "She thinks I'm just being negative," Cassidy said. "She thinks I don't like him, which, I don't, but that's not the point. What do you want me to do?" I said. "I don't know. She listens to you, she always has." I hung up and sat with it for about 10 minutes. Then I called a guy I knew who'd done some work for a property law firm in Ancaster, and I asked him to make a couple of calls. By 6 o'clock that evening, I had 3 names, 2 people in Calgary and 1 in Ottawa who had filed civil suits related to Brendan Solt's previous projects. None of the suits had gone anywhere because by the time they were filed, Brendan had restructured or relocated or otherwise made himself difficult to hold. But the pattern was there, documented, real. I printed the relevant documents at the FedEx on Barton Street and I drove to Laurel's. She answered the door in paint clothes, the ones she wore when she was working on the dining room trim she'd been putting off since January. She had a streak of white on her forearm. She looked surprised to see me. "Hey," she said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I know. Can I come in?" She stepped back. I came in. The house smelled like paint, and the baseboard heater in the hall clicked the way it always did when the temperature dropped outside. Everything was exactly the same as it always was, and I suddenly felt the weight of how much time I'd spent in this house and how much it had always felt, to me, like a place I belonged. I put the documents on the kitchen table. She didn't pick them up right away. She looked at them, then at me. "Cassidy called you," she said. "She's worried. So am I." "Garrett, just look at the documents, Laurel." She looked at them. She took her time. She was thorough. She always was. She read the names, the dates, the suit filings, the project names, and the amounts. She set the last page down and was quiet for a long moment. "He told me about the Calgary project," she said finally. "He said it was a misunderstanding with a contractor. He said he had documentation." "He has documentation for everything," I said. That's part of it. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. She was thinking. I let her think. The 40,000 goes Friday, she said. I know. I already wired the 10. Cassidy told me. She stood up and walked to the window, which looked out at the backyard, the one she'd been slowly turning into a garden since she bought the place. She stood there for a long time. I didn't say anything. I liked him, she said, quietly, not defensively, just as a fact. I know. I knew something felt off. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. You're not paranoid. She turned around. Her eyes were bright, which she would have hated me noticing, so I looked at the documents instead. I don't know what to do with the 10,000, she said. Talk to a lawyer this week. There may be options. But stop the Friday transfer first. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Okay, yeah. She called her bank from the kitchen while I stood in the hall. I heard her on hold, then talking, then on hold again. It took about 40 minutes to sort out the stop on the transfer. When she came back into the kitchen, she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. She sat down across from me at the table. Thank you, she said. You don't have to thank me. Garrett, thank you. We sat there for a minute. The heater clicked. Outside, someone's dog was barking at something down the street. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah, Canadian Tire, November. I looked at her. You heard me, she said. Not a question. I heard you. You didn't say anything. No, I said. I didn't. She picked up one of the document pages and set it back down without reading it. Something to do with her hands. Why not? She said. I thought about all the answers I'd rehearsed over the years, in the truck, in the shower, at jobs where I was doing something mechanical enough that my brain could wander. All the explanations that sounded reasonable. The timing. Not wanting to ruin things. Not being sure she meant it. I was afraid, I said. That was the true one. She looked at me for a long moment. Of what? Of being wrong about what you meant. Of saying something and having it change things between us. Of losing this. I gestured vaguely at the kitchen, the documents, the paint on her arm, all of it. I thought the risk wasn't worth it, and then I thought I'd waited too long. And then you were seeing someone, and I thought, well, that's the answer? That wasn't the answer, she said. I know that now. She was quiet for a moment. The dog outside had stopped barking. I meant it, she said, in November. In case that wasn't clear. It's getting clearer, I said. She laughed, this short, helpless laugh, and pressed her hand over her eyes for a second. Then she dropped her hand and looked at me. We're idiots, she said. Yeah, specifically you. You could have said something. That's fair. 4 years, Garrett. I know. I know. She shook her head, but she was almost smiling. The caulking gun, she said. The grout conversation. The Ticats game. All regrettable in retrospect. The Ticats game especially, we lost. We did lose, I said. That was a bad one. She looked at me across the table. The kitchen light was warm. Outside it was dark now, and the neighborhood was quiet the way Hamilton gets quiet on a weeknight, just the ambient hum of a city that's been working all day and is finally resting. So, she said. So, I said. What do we do now? I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, and she didn't move it away. I think, I said slowly, that I'd like to take you to dinner. An actual dinner. Not hardware store runs and Tic-Tac games. Dinner with a reservation, at a place where the food costs more than $12 a plate. She considered this seriously. Reservations, she said. In Hamilton? I was thinking Dundas, actually. There's a place on King Street. You've already looked. I may have looked. She turned her hand over under mine and held it, loosely the way you hold something you're not sure of yet but want to try. Okay, she said. Dinner, Friday, I said. If you're free. I was going to wire $40,000 on Friday, she said. So as it turns out, I'm very free. We went to dinner on Friday. We went back to that same restaurant 3 weeks later, and the week after that she made dinner at her place. The first time she'd cooked for me in 4 years of knowing each other. Which felt significant, and she made it significant by making it good, this roast chicken with root vegetables that she'd clearly been practicing, because she kept asking if it was okay. It was okay. It was better than okay. We took things slowly, not because we weren't sure. We'd had 4 years to get sure about each other, I think, in all the ways that matter, but because there was no reason to rush. We had time. We had a house full of unfinished projects and a whole city of Saturday mornings ahead of us, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was spending them on borrowed time. I still do electrical work. She still teaches. She is still slowly fixing the house, and I still help, though now it's different in the way that things are different when they stop being about staying close to someone and become about just being there. She bought a better caulking gun, by the way. This past fall, back at Canadian Tire. Different cashier this time. When she asked if we were shopping together, Laurel answered before I could. Yes, she said. He's my husband. The cashier smiled and started scanning. Laurel looked at me sideways with the specific expression she gets when she thinks she's being very funny.